But the good thing is this is recorded, everybody. So if you miss anything, well, you're already here. You're the early people.
Yeah, exactly.
So Bess, you want to?
Great. So welcome to Collection Spotlight with the Co-Center for the Arts and First American Art Magazine. We've been doing this for a while now, and it's been so wonderful. So Collection Spotlight is a deep dive into pieces from the co-collections led by incredible, wonderful artists. So I'm Bess Murphy. I'm the curator at the Co-Center here in Santa Fe, and I'm here at the Co today. The Co-Center is a nonprofit art center. We hold a collection of Indigenous arts from around the world. It's a hands-on interactive collection. So as we ease open, for anybody who's in Santa Fe or coming through Santa Fe, we are currently open by appointment and people can come in, spend time, research in the collections, see these pieces that we're going to show today in person. And we're so pleased that you're here, that this is continuing on. And I guess I'll just pass it over to America to talk about magazine.
Sure. So this is a partnership between the Co, who I love, and First American Art Magazine. So I'm out of Norman, Oklahoma, and we're a quarterly print and digital magazine. Our goal is to cover the Western Hemisphere, Indigenous arts from, Greenland down to Tierra del Fuego. And I'm really excited that we might be able to have more Latin American coverage soon. And I do want to say that during this talk, we really encourage you to share your questions. So you can type them in the chat, but you can also, at the end, we'll let everyone unmute. You can have a conversation with John, because I think no matter what your question is, everyone will benefit from it. So please don't be shy. And it's really my pleasure to introduce John Hagen today, who is coming to us from Wisconsin, but he can tell you more about how he is headed back to his home of Alaska. He is Unangax, Iñupiaq, Irish and Danish American curator, photographer, and fisherman. He's currently working as the curator of Indigenous arts and initiatives at the Anchorage Museum in Anchorage, Alaska. He is also a photographer originally from Haines, Alaska. The inspirations for his work are the people, place, and interactions between those. So today, John is going to talk about fishing. So I think this is really exciting for anyone with fishing gear in your collections. Like, how do you talk about them? So John, take it away.
So actually, I will have to, I guess, say a little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong fisherman. I was born in pretty quickly after I was born, I was on a fishing boat. I think my parents had me on our gill netter in Southeast Alaska when I was just a baby, and we were getting ready to fish for salmon. And over the years, my brother stopped being interested in fishing, and I had picked that up, and I started fishing, and I kept fishing my way through college. And at some point, I decided I wanted to get more into photography, and I kind of went down a track of photojournalism in my life. But as I started becoming more of an artist, it actually coincided with a revisiting of my fishing career. I ran a commercial fishing boat fishing for salmon out of Haines, Alaska for a while, and I worked as an artist in Haines, in Alaska, and a photographer. And so much of what I did was centered around salmon. And I have two weird cycles in my life of fishing and art. Like, I make a lot more art in the winter time, and the summertime was always a fishing time for me. And for me and my family and my ancestors, that means fishing for salmon. And the place where my family used to fish is in a place called Untitled. And actually, my aunt and uncle still have a fishing camp there, and they still go out there every year. And they're bummed that I switched my careers to work at a museum and I can't go out fishing this summer. So, but I'm excited to change my hats. So, but fishing is like, summertime is the salmon time and fishing time, and like a lot of what we do is centered around the cycles of the fish that come. My first fish are hooligan, or I think where I'm from in Haines, it's called sock. It's an oily smelt-like fish, and that kind of fish means the winter's over, and the hooligan are followed by salmon pretty quick, and all different 5 species of salmon. So, so kind of as I get to bounce between all the hats that I get to wear, one of my favorite things to do is see fishing objects in museums and collections. It's one of the things I gravitate towards, especially if some places that have newer things or older, more historic items. But I like to see how other people catch fish. And actually kind of a fun hobby of mine is looking at bodies of water, trying to figure out how we'd get fish out of it. So I'm right now out my window, I'm looking at Lake Superior, and I know that there's some sport fishing and there's also commercial fishing there, but I've already figured out how to get more fish out of it if I really wanted to, but it's not what I do. So
Someday your big challenge will be coming to Santa Fe.
Oh
And
yeah,
that.
that will be.
That'll be a really big challenge.
Well, you're an II alumnus.
Yeah.
I am. I went to school there, and
Yeah.
I have I think I went fishing about a dozen times down there in various places, and I have not caught a fish in New Mexico.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Someday. Well,
So-
I'm.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go, John. Sorry.
I was looking through some of the objects you had there and shared, and it was you have a fun collection of fishing objects as well as Alaska Native work there, and it'd be fun to talk about some of that stuff, and that's what would be fun to do.
Yeah, for such a landlocked state and for being so far from Alaska, it's always really nice to be able to focus on these pieces because Ted Coe, who was the founder of the Coe Center, traveled from Santa Fe, did road trips up to Alaska a number of times throughout his lifetime. And so a lot of these pieces he bought on those trips, the majority of the pieces he bought on trips when he was traveling and buying pieces. So I know you have some conversation around that, but I think we're going to start outside of Alaska, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So like I said, so I'm going to be I'm going to be John's hands on site. And so John, as you know, just tell me which to zoom in on. And we're going to start with these 2 fishing lures, but which one would you like to start with? I don't think we talked about that.
Oh, we didn't actually. Both of them, I think when I saw the picture of them on the collection stuff, they were shown together. So
yeah,
we can show. Let's start with the small one first.
Okay, excellent. And I think that one's slightly older. I mean, they're both. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So what these are, and I've learned a little bit about these. They're actually called fish decoys, is what they are. And what folks did with them is they'd put them in the water. They'd cut a hole in the ice because they were primarily for ice fishing, and they'd tie a line to the top of them. And as they jig them, they would fly around in circles, basically. And you would bring other fish in, like pike or rainbow trout or lake trout, and they would then spear the fish. So these fish decoys are actually, I think they're the indigenous people from around the Great Lakes, Ojibwe, Menominee, and stuff, all use these and use them to catch fish. And over the years, they kind of actually got picked up by a lot of other people. So, or the other folks that lived in this neck of the woods. So these are hand carved and very usually intricately painted. So, and this guy is, I'm not sure what kind of wood he is, but he has metal fins.
Yeah.
I think the other one actually says, the other one has feather fins.
It does.
And then there was a request. Can you talk about the weight that's been inserted into the bottom of the wood form?
So without being actually able to hold that or touch it, I'm assuming that's a little piece of lead.
Yeah.
That's just to help it get down in the water. I'm not sure if it's kind of neutrally buoyant, like where we're just hanging there, or if they just want to be able to get it to sink. I'm assuming that would be the case. So we want that guy to go down in the water and so you could swim it in circles. And the one kind of thing as I'm looking at that, I'm sure like if you held onto the eye of it, you don't need to because it's an older object and kind of want to hold it securely. That should be able to be balanced so it would kind of sit in the water and actually do a pretty good job at being a fish.
And these are both from the Canadian side. They're Ojibwe, and you said that this was slightly older. They're about from 1925, give or take.
Yeah, and this one's probably slightly earlier in the 20th century. Although that might not, I think that's probably based on, how much paint is left. So you can see, it's sort of hard to see on this one because I see there's a question, are these painted? So this one, like right here, you can see some paint residue on there. And so all that's remaining is white, but I'll switch over to the other one so we can see that.
And I guess the paint would be necessary so the fish below could actually see it.
Yeah. So being a attempted I think I call myself an alleged fly fisherman. I'm looking at the feathers on this. I'm assuming those would be, I'm sure once those get in the water, those actually would almost make this thing look like it's swimming on its own. So even if it's just sitting there, it would kind of pulse a little bit and look a lot more alive. So as I looked around, there's people that still make them.
Cool.
Both it's probably more practiced by non-Indigenous people, but there's still some Indigenous carvers. I was trying to do what I could to find more recent carvers. There's a guy named John Snow. I don't think he's with us anymore, but he's a pretty recent practitioner of fish decoy carving. So if you can see you can see the holes across the top of the fin there. Those would be to help make sure it balances out in the water. So you kind of want it to look like a fish and make it. So I've seen some of these fish decoys like this. I've seen they're really elaborate, and others can be as simple as this. Maybe not simple. It's something can be painted out like this, but yeah, these guys are from the Great Lakes, and like in a way, I kind of wanted to thinking of that as a land acknowledgement too, of thinking about where I'm at and thinking about how other folks catch fish while they're in this area. So while I was looking through some of the objects in your collection that came from Alaska, one of my favorite actually is the eagle with a halibut that you have there. I love that.
Let me pick it out and walk it
Okay.
over. Let's see.
So that's we have a eagle perched on a halibut. There's some form line elements there, but it's a really is this made out of red cedar, or do we know what that is?
We don't, but
okay.
Probably we have just wood and paint.
Okay, gotcha.
How do you tell red cedar from yellow cedar when you're looking at it?
I actually, so one would be a little bit darker. One would be, well, I don't want to sound too on point, but more yellow looking. They definitely have a
perfect sense.
really yellow look. And when they get older, red cedar would be, I guess from what I've seen in the past, as long as it hasn't been outside, it would look really dark brown, and yellow cedar would be just kind of more yellowish brown.
Okay.
But once everything gets outside, it gets gray and oxidized, and it's a little harder to tell.
And this was all painted before. This staged from about 1880, huh? And you don't know the artist, but it's Tlingit?
We don't. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So one of the reasons that this really stuck out to me is it's actually kind of a fun fishing story. One of my dad's friends saw a halibut eagle swimming to shore carrying a halibut. Like sometimes when an eagle grabs a fish that's a little bit too big to to haul in, it'll kind of swim to shore with it. So if an eagle grabs onto a big salmon and that's a really big score for them, they'll swim to shore with it. Halibut are known to be, excuse me, known to be on the bottom of the ocean, and they might be like 1,000 feet. Actually, trying to do my math, they might be a couple 100 feet down in the water, but every once in a while, halibut go up in the water column, and it'd be a pretty rare occurrence to see a halibut getting eaten by an eagle. But in some ways, that's like I said, what struck me about this piece was like, I've actually heard about eagles eating halibut. It's not uncommon.
I'm trying to show, this was something that I had to ask you at our last meeting, and I hope I can show it. I don't know if people can see that, but I had to ask you about the eyes on it because I've always wondered about how it has both eyes on the top, and I wasn't sure if this was just a different perspective that the artist, that the maker was playing with, or if this was like real fishiness.
That is real fishiness. That's actually a very realistic depiction of a halibut. So a halibut has its eyes on the top side of its head. If I'm running my growing up in Southeast Alaska, you end up with a pretty healthy dose of fish biology. But if I remember correctly, they halibut start off kind of in a vertical fish pattern, and as they kind of mature, those eyes switch to one side, and then they're so they can be looking up basically. So they will usually hang out down on the bottom and are ambush feeders. But yeah, it's interesting. This has some form line elements, like the feathers are almost have a slight trigon shape or oval shape, and can definitely see the ovoid kind of Klimt styling in the eyes. But
Oh yeah, the eyes for sure.
the beak, in a way, the beak too is it's kind of bridging that actual that's actually a little bit more shaped like a form line beak design.
It does actually stand, and it is slightly precarious. So it's actually they are detachable. It's just connected with some nails going through into the eagle's talons. And you can see, I mean, there is some damage on the back and the wing where it was cracked because it is so precarious. He's definitely sort of
It's 100
top heavy.
years old.
But amazingly, it balances perfectly well. Like, we don't have a stand beyond this for this piece. So, but to hold it up for you all to see is definitely, it makes it feel more precarious than when it's actually down on a flat surface.
And then how heavy is this statue?
I'm so bad at that game, America. It's
Okay. Is it
probably
heavier than a fat cat?
It's heavier than a fat cat. That's perfect.
Okay, a fat cat's about 15 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about a fat cat.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. So yeah. And it is, I mean, it's very solid. The eagle is incredibly solid feeling. Obviously it's solid wood, but there's something about picking it up where you're just like, oh yeah, you are present. Yeah.
And actually, when you mention that, like that's when I think of red cedar and the red cedar objects, red cedar is a little bit lighter than yellow cedar or other woods like birch or I guess alder even, or other. I'm just thinking about woods that would be in Southeast Alaska.
Right.
So that's another way I would tell the difference between yellow and red cedar would be just the presence and how much it weighs.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's just a guessing. But
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that you chose this piece because I feel like this is one of my favorite pieces in the collection, just because I love I love how the viscera is like so perfectly captured. It's so amazing. And I don't know if I even got that enough for you all to see there.
Oh, wow. Oh, that is, wow.
A little,
Yeah.
That's a little bit
anatomical.
graphic.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So, but I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. I was looking through a couple of notes I had about the fish decoys. As I was looking around at other fish decoy examples, there's actually some folks that have there's beaver and frog fish decoys as well. So I'm not sure what fish you'd be trying to lure in with a beaver shaped decoy.
Yeah, maybe that's a fish repellent. Go away,
Yeah.
fish.
Oh, now I want to see those. They sound really cute. Huh.
There's
Wonderful.
there's a whole spiral on Google. I'm sure you could do with, fish decoys.
Absolutely.
So are we doing the ulu next?
Let's do the
Yeah.
ulu.
Cool.
Perfect. Okay.
And this was described as a scraper, but I mean, ulus are used both ways, slicing and scraping.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty useful tools from what I could find out. Like it's one of those things like, I would guess this would be a scraper, a little bit smaller that way. So they're pretty versatile tools where you could actually make a ulu for whatever purpose you needed to make it for. So, but it could either be, it's probably likely designed that way, but it also could be something that you would grind down or from what I understand, so that's probably likely as a slate blade, where you would take a piece of slate is a pretty flaky material and flaky stone, and so you'd nap off a piece or you'd break off a piece of like that and get it close to the shape you'd want, and then you'd grind it down. And in some ways, a blade itself is a little bit disposable. You'd use the blade and use it until it didn't fit your needs, and you could swap it out.
Oh, cool.
So,
and this dates back to about 1875, and they're saying that would be walrus ivory for the handle hung.
Yeah, and fossilized.
Oh,
so it's definitely feels more rock-like than bone-like. So
that definitely that would make sense. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of ulus and a lot of different shapes and uses. It's not uncommon to see small ones like this, but it's also not uncommon to see much larger ones for chopping up salmon. For the most part, the newer ones are made out of metal. But I mean, I've seen metal ones made like this, and I've also seen much larger stone-shaped ones. You can get a lot of force on whatever you're cutting with them, with the way you can leverage them, probably. And you can do a lot of cutting, even if how does that feel? Does it feel pretty sharp still, or does it feel pretty?
It's pretty dulled down, although you can
Okay.
see, I don't know if I can angle it too much to catch the light a little bit. So you can see how the blade was there, but it's been chipped for sure. And so, but when you look at it closely, you can see how it's angled like a blade. And so I can imagine being able to sharpen it pretty easily, and be able to hone that into a finer point.
I mean, yeah, slate is it's a fairly soft material. I think also it's used for spear points for some folks, and also much larger, different kinds of blades and cutting materials. Trying to look. So ulu like this, or not like this, but they're used all across the coast of Alaska, out in the Aleutians, all the way across Alaska and through Canada into Greenland. So, and they're used. There's a different ulu for different folks and purposes.
and this particular one is from Canada, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Can you speak to the carving on the handle? Is that decorative, or would it just be something known only to the owner?
I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah.
I could see, I mean, fossilized walrus ivory like this, or even normal walrus ivory would get pretty slick if you were using it for something. So I could see it having both purposes. But,
yeah, that your fingers could kind of hold on to that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at imagining where my hand would land if I was using that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had even smaller hands, and seeing that might be a place. I mean, it's likely it could be both.
Like that? Would
That's
you
a
hold it
good
like
question.
that? Or like
more in your, so,
like
I mean,
that?
I'm imagining using it to scrape down.
Like sort of scraping like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I've heard these smaller ones using for sewing purposes too, or even hair cutting hair.
Huh.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that sounds terrifying.
I don't know. You can get a lot of leverage on that little guy, so I guess maybe, I don't know about if that's the right thing. That's kind of a pretty cool thing. I mean, now you folks might either make their own, or you could buy a souvenir ulu, but those are probably too small. Actually, it's kind of interesting that there's a pretty big business of selling stainless steel ulus and even ulu blanks. But if folks still use these, and they still use them pretty regularly, and yeah, they typically would either make their own, or I've heard materials, popular materials now are like circular saw blades or saw blades.
Oh, cool.
The biggest one is trying to get steel that you can use, that's tool steel, and you're trying to grind it down and not blow the temper on it.
Interesting.
For newer versions of hula.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then in terms of fishing, these would be used.
Maybe something like that might be used. I can imagine that's probably a little bit too small to be used for processing fish, but folks still use much larger ulus for deboning and cutting up fish for smoking or drying salmon. I'm thinking about somebody that yeah. I'm trying to even think of my grandmother my aunt was telling me, I had asked if she had one sitting on her shelf in her fish camp, and she said she hadn't used it in a few years, but she used to cut up fish with a larger ulu like that. But like that one is probably used for sewing or things around. But I just had seen that as an example. I didn't know folks process up fish and can do it quicker almost with that than a Western style knife.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
And then is it the float basket yet? The fishing float basket?
We can do, I think we were going to do the fish wheel, but do we want to do the float?
Sure.
Which direction do you want to go, John?
Let's go. Let's talk about the fit. I guess go for the fish wheel. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's wild.
And you'll have to guide me again so my hand can be the water, because like some sort of spatial processing thing or something.
I've never heard of these before in my life.
So these are pretty actually used. They're used a lot in the Yukon River. I think they're also used in the Copper River to catch salmon. But I had to reach out to my friend who lives in Fort Yukon, and he said, "Oh yeah, we still use them. That's what we use to catch fish." So okay. So let's look at the fish wheel. So okay. So how this is working is this is a wheel, and it's powered by the river going past it. So what we can imagine is the river's going down, and it's basically actually, so the way you're pushing it would be the way the fish would be going. So
I keep on doing that.
But so actually, imagine the water pushing on the back side of that scoop, like this way, just like that.
Okay, and the fish are going into being scooped up.
I'm a fish. I get scooped up.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Now I'm the water who's pushing it that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
These are
they get,
so complex. How do you know how long they date back?
I was trying to figure that out actually. I
I mean,
19th
this is
century.
machinery.
19th century.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
this
came
is
in
so
with
innovative.
Euro-Americans, but they were quickly adapted.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, so you can the fish catch it and get in there, and they're scooped up, and you catch them at 2 or 3 at a time, 4 or 5 at a time every time they go by, and you can quickly put up a whole bunch of fish and salmon with that.
Oh my gosh.
They're mostly used for catching both chum salmon and Chinook salmon. On the Copper River, I'd be for red salmon as well. Yeah, so that's the fish wheel. Size-wise, though, I've seen them larger than I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. Larger than a very large pickup
Fine.
truck.
Why make a model? I think this was made just for sale.
Correct.
So intricate.
Yeah.
And that's exciting that it's signed. It's Micah Malcolm, who's
Micah Malcolm.
Athabascan from Alaska.
Yeah.
He's from Eagle, Alaska. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool, right on.
Yeah,
Thank
Micah
you.
Malcolm, Eagle, Alaska.
Birch
Yeah.
bark, smoked moose hide, wood lashings.
So those are from, we have like our catalog that you're looking at has a
Oh.
bunch of these pieces all together. So this one
Okay.
is, like, why isn't it showing any of the materials on this one? This one's just wood
there's no
and
moose hide on that.
screen. There's no moose hide on this, but this was one of those pieces that was purchased when Ted was up in Alaska, and he bought these actually from Sarah. He bought the other pieces that are like birch bark and smoked moose hide. There's a couple of babiche
Really?
bags, yes, and that Sarah Malcolm made.
Really?
And then he met
Wow.
Sarah and purchased this wheel model from her son, Micah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll have to pull those up. I'm like, I don't know you, Aaron, but nice to meet you. And
Virgin.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I know Micah and Sarah was one of the last to make babiche bags and also well intricate birch bark baskets.
Yep, exactly. So we have some of those pieces.
And then, John, for the real ones, what would you use for that netting? What would that be?
Gosh, I mean, I've seen them everything from I've seen chain link fencing.
Oh, that's
it's a pretty,
awesome.
Chicken wire. Yeah, it just depends on what they had.
Nice. Very cool.
And are these common? Mario asked if tourists bought these.
Like the models.
The models, not the real ones.
Yeah, they're not super common. Micah's one of the better model makers these days. They're not unheard of, but they're not super common, I would say.
So this isn't a tourist thing. We should not look for these when we go to Alaska. We'll have to make our own.
I mean, it's really so perfectly crafted. Like it's incredible because it spins so smoothly. It's really nice. So, and it's weighted really nicely. Great.
Yeah, balance seems
The
to
other
be
advantage to using those are that when the fish are dumped into the basket, or basically they're still alive, and so for conservation, unlike using a net, you can release certain fish if you don't want them, or you have too many, or you know you're done processing kind of thing. Whereas with the nets, it's not. You can't really do that. I mean, you can sometimes, but the fish get a lot more beat up that way.
Yeah, definitely other ways of fishing like gill net, the fish are, I think the mortality is a lot higher. You're
John,
catching fish.
You were
Go
saying
ahead.
these are even used for counting fish?
Yeah, I mean, down where I'm at, originally from in Haines, the Fish and Game even uses them on one of the
cool.
river systems to help try and count so they can guesstimate how many fish are going up the river. So,
And then they'll release.
yes, yeah,
Cool.
and yeah,
Wonderful.
that's pretty cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think the last item we pulled out is the glass ball.
Yep.
And so at the heart of that we can't quite see is actually a glass fishing float that are pretty common to see on the shores in Alaska and around. Those are fishing floats used in Japanese fishing floats, and they're pretty pretty sought after beachcombing devices. So those would be on top of minus the basketry on top of it. Those would be were used at one time as far as fishing in Japan. So, but there's a lot of them that got knocked loose and they're floating around in the currents and occasionally wash up on shore. So, where was this basket from again? On the note?
This is from Washington, from Nia Bay, and it's
Okay.
Isabel Ides is the maker.
1899 for the basket.
No, when she
Nice.
was born.
Oh, okay. Thank
So,
you.
and the
Thank you.
basket. Yeah, I don't know if we have a date for this, but it was probably because he bought this on one of his trips, so late 80s, probably.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I picked it because it's kind of fun to see. It's one of the things that a lot of folks, some of the folks that make baskets in Alaska will do is they'll craft them around glass bottles and such. And I've never seen one around a glass float like this. Just
Yeah.
pretty spectacular.
I love that crossover and ocean crossing that this holds in it, which is so beautiful. Yeah. But so floats like this weren't used and aren't used anywhere along the Pacific coast necessarily.
No. They're primarily, I've heard them mostly described as being Japanese fishing floats, and I don't believe they use them much more and anymore. My dad was telling me that one of the reasons they used to use them is they held up with a lot of pressure when the nets sank. So like you'd have bundles of them and on the top of a net, and then the net below it, likely like some sort of sinkers in the bottom of it.
So what would be used? Like, is it wood? I don't know anything about fishing. So like wood floats would be used, or now it's probably like styrofoam. Like I don't know.
Styrofoam and fall. Nowadays, we use a lot of foam floats, and even in the 60s and 70s, they used to use red cedar floats. Actually, at least where I'm from, to float nets. I'm mostly talking about keel netting, and then also I've heard of cork being used.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, I believe, beyond that, wood is a pretty common thing to use for floating in one shape or form.
Nice.
So
I love the open weave so you can see the glass.
It's beautiful.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, this really should be like hung up with light through it so that you can see, because the glass is, there's no way I can capture this for you guys, but the glass on these floats has a lot of air bubbles in it. So it has this sort of like underwater sensation in a way on its own, just the glass does. And so it's sort of interesting how she wove around that so that you can see that surface play. I don't know. Yeah.
I would never guess what that was.
Yeah, it looks, I mean, from like a complete novice's eye, it looks like an ornament, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know my sister is really a big fan of collecting those, so she has a whole a collection of them. And those little fishing floats are going to be about that size, that softball size to I've seen like much larger ones. Those are pretty tough to find. So like 20 inches or so.
Oh my gosh.
Very cool.
Yeah, so you were going to share your images with us
I
as well.
have a handful of photos I would like to share with you.
All right.
One of my my most recent projects I had worked on as an artist was I went back to my my home, I guess my ancestral village, like where my grandma and my Unangax family is from, in a place called Ojibwe, and I made photos there. I really wanted to. I was realizing it's a space that maybe not much art has been made, and it was kind of an interesting thing. There was a lot of remnants of fishing from there. This is an old abandoned cannery building, and has been shot at, like a lot of things happen when things get abandoned in Alaska. Actually, and also kind of in the background, we can see like a landing craft type boat that's also kind of been sunk on the shore there from another part of that. So this is I at one point I think I described this as like Tom Spence's cabin. So this is an abandoned fishing cabin and modern day fishing boats or set net boats. So the kind of fishing my family did and still does in Unangax is called set net fishing, where we take a net and it has to be tied to the shore, and we wait for the salmon to come by, and hopefully they get in our net. So, but
Are these digital images or?
these are digital images. Yeah,
Okay.
Mostly most of my work right now is it starts off digital, and then I print it digitally as well on inkjet. I'm trained traditionally. I'm trained and went to school, and a lot of my earlier work is in on film and then gelatin silver. But living in rural Alaska, I actually had a little bit of trouble getting some of the chemistry there, and actually dealing with the chemistry responsibly. Like, I didn't have a good way of recovering the silver out of my stuff, so I quickly switched to all digital. So maybe if I
Good
ever
argument for digital though.
Yeah.
I think there's ways of working through film chemistry and that are a little bit more responsible, or that doesn't get as many nasty chemicals out, and I might explore that a little bit more. But and especially so living out or working out in a little village like Unangax, it was really important to kind of have as small of a footprint as possible. So it's a lot easier to bring little compact flash cards out with me than it is to try and haul a bunch of chemistry.
Yeah.
But so one of the things I photographed while I was out there is, and that seemed like it showed up, was this kind of how the land seemed to absorb whatever else was out there, and how nature seems to have a way of just taking things over out in Bristol Bay. It's such a brutal place that it just sort of sucks. Just everything that's out there either falls apart if it's not being taken care of, and eventually just the way the grass is out there, it just almost eats the land, eats anything that you leave behind. So this is always something that seemed to pop up a lot in my work, is this like just people using land and not using material and working on the land. People do actually live out in Unangax. I think there's 3 or 4 people live out there year round.
Oh my gosh.
It's not just abandoned houses and cabins like this, but that showed up a lot in this work. But this is somebody actually fishing out there.
Cool.
This is my cousin's grandson. So that's a whole bunch. I think it was 5 generations of folks out there at one point fishing. But so this is set net fishing. There's a big long rope that goes from the shore and is tied out and tied to an anchor out in the water. And when the fishing game says we can start fishing, and we get out and tie a net to that rope like this, and it's about 15 feet deep, and that's a fish hitting that net. And then so the fish are going up the river, and if everything goes according to plan, they swim into the net. And these are red salmon that we're catching up there. So one of the things I used, I have a kind of a interchangeable lens digital camera that I use for a lot of my work, but I had a small waterproof digital camera with me for this event. One thing that ended up happening is throughout my time, I would always, when I was fishing, I'd always stick it in a pocket in my life jacket that I wore, and the silt from the river kind of found a way to get in everything. And over the summer, the silt had kind of scuffed up the lens on the camera. And I found it kind of started giving it this weird dreamlike effect as I was using it.
Beautiful. So
it was one of my old photo professor of mine told me to embrace the randomness. So this kind of what should be a destroyed digital camera is going to show up in some other work at some point.
Nice.
I don't advocate for destroying lenses, but if they do, sometimes you gotta run with them. So this is I think generation 5, and these are red salmon in Alaska, and yeah, this is what we're catching and fishing. That's still happening. So, and this is what folks are getting ready to do right now across Alaska. I think if you're in the lower 48, in some places you might see Copper River salmon, and that's should be fresh salmon that's just coming out. And then the next stuff that's going to hit the market is likely Bristol Bay salmon like this. So these guys will start showing up around the 4th of July, and that season's really short. But yeah, then after that, I don't know. I think also there's all sorts of fish are starting to happen right now.
So that's a good tip for clueless people, is like, okay, midsummer, don't get your salmon beforehand, unless it's smoked, I guess.
Unless it's smoked. I mean, a lot of stuff that you'll see in the market is it's been flash frozen. So in theory,
Okay,
it
so
should
it's
be.
not that bad.
It's not as bad. I think it might get processed out within a day or two of getting caught, especially this Bristol Bay stuff. They'll have like processors anchored out in front of the fishing grounds, or processing canneries. We call them fish processors or canneries, really close to where the fish are caught. So
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, summertime is the time to get fish, but if you can't get that flash frozen stuff is a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was it for that.
Okay.
Those
Well, we can,
images are so stunning. Yeah.
yeah. We can open it up to final questions if anyone has questions or comments that they want to share. We're all mellow. We're all hungry for fish now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be the fishing guy, but I definitely always put in a plug to make sure you look for wild Alaska salmon.
Yes.
that's just way better for you than the farm stuff.
Yeah, that's too dangerous for the environment. I mean, the diseases, yeah, it seems like there's way too many issues.
But I always joke that wild salmon has just one bad day in its life, but
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
I think everyone's good, I guess. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to share this. And this video will be available. And yeah, we wish you luck. You're about to move back to Alaska. So good luck with this major change.
I'm excited to be able to head back there and change things up and yeah, start a new phase in my life that may be a little less fish centric, but
there's definitely an art show waiting to be curated for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Wonderful. John, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about these pieces and share with us. We really appreciate it.
excellent. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And we'll meet again next month. Take care.
Bye.
Cool.
Everyone
Thank
have
you.
a great week.